Hello and welcome, and thanks to our next Learn Fast webinar. This is number 12 of our fifth year of doing this, and number 178 since we started at the early part of the pandemic. Something that we've been working hard at keeping these going and having a whale of a good time, obviously as well. We've been having fun, and this is just next in the line of great webinars that we've been able to hold and chat with and talk with people. This one is a little outside of sometimes what most of our the folks that are listening to us um, are into, but hill climbs are a very important part, especially over in Europe and Italy. I talked with some of our Italian friends. Hill climbs are a big deal over there. Over in the eastern part of the United States, they're big, but of course, one of the biggest in the entire world is Pikes Peak, and we have teamed up with Tom Tang this year, and we've worked together, helping him do what he is doing and putting things together, and even sent Bryc, our tech there to work with all the different consumers there that had our products, and especially with Tom. So thanks everybody for coming. Tom, thanks for joining us again here today. I am looking forward to hearing some of your story.
Yeah, thanks Roger and Bryc for having me back. Really excited to be here. I feel like the last time we did one of these, we were gearing up to go to the mountain, and now it's done. So lots to reflect on and talk about.
You were in high gear already when we when we chatted last time, and you were going strong. And I know even a couple days after that, there was a ton of technical things happening, and then you started the event where it really got wound up. So I am tickled to have you here, and with things a little bit slower, and where you can reflect back and talk about it. Well, our title of this is Conquering Pikes Peak, so I don't want to give away exactly what happened here, but obviously you had a good time, and made it to the top, and we will talk a little bit more about that. Let's start with just a little bit about yourself again, Tom, just to reacquaint folks that maybe weren't here for the first time you were here. What's a little bit of your background in you personally, and then you in motorsports?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet yet, I'm Tom Tang. I was lucky enough to drive at Pikes Peak a couple weeks ago for the 102nd running. It was my first time, so I was a rookie at the mountain. I've been doing track days, time attack, wheel-to-wheel racing, from sprints to enduros for, I guess, coming up on like 15 years. So been at it for a while now. And Pikes Peak was something that was on the bucket list, and finally being able to do it this year is definitely a dream come true. I'm still very much on that high right now.
You took a car that you have ran in the past, and the history of that car was kind of interesting to me. You started off with a normal track day kind of a car, turned it into an endurance race car, and then took some time and turned it into a hill climb car. Give us a little bit of a background on that as you did that.
Yeah, so I had a couple of other cars before the E46 that kind of made the transition from, street car to track day car to race car. This E46 is a little bit of a newer chassis for us on the team. It's a 2002, but we bought it in 2021 and started building it for the 2022 25 Hours of Thunder Hill. So we spent a little over a year getting that car put together, sorted, but it basically went from being like a rolling shell stripped down to bare chassis and being built back up to be an endurance car. And I think the philosophy behind that build was pretty different compared to, say, hill climb or time attack. So we wanted the car to be tough. We didn't really mind if it was a little bit on the heavier side, just wanting it to have, metal panels and things like that, so it could take a beating and survive 25 hours. And we were able to do that. And then after finishing the 25 in December of 22, said to ourselves, hey, I think it's time to kind of go after that next goal. And that was Pikes Peak. And obviously for something like a hill climb, we wanted to then kind of go in the opposite direction and really get as much weight out of the car as possible. So we actually, took it back down to essentially a bare chassis again and rebuilt it back up with, carbon and fiberglass panels. So the car is majority carbon fiber now in terms of all of the body work. We added, bigger wheels and tires, big wing and a matching, aero package in terms of, on the front end and across the sides. And then through boost at it, as well as a sequential and a whole bunch of other things that I can get into later, but that's the gist.
That's yeah, the way that the car came together. Interesting that it came from such a long where he's, some would say, I think that's the way they sell the 25 hours, the longest endurance race in North America, and then to this very very short, a little over 10-minute run, right? It's quite the difference,
Yeah.
and a quite what the different needs of the car. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. I think next I kind of led Bryc that we were going to save him to the end, but I think we will bring Bryc in a little bit and talk a little bit about we are AIM, and we are talking about the hardware that's on the car. Bryc, if you could spend just a couple of a minute or two on talking about what was on the car from AIM and some of the other parts, if you wish, and give us a little idea of what the setup was that we're going to be looking at some of the data from.
Gotcha. So the core of the setup is a PDM 32, which if for some reason some of you guys don't know, that's a power distribution module, but it's also a data logger and has a slave 10-inch display that goes along with it. So that was managing all of the power on the car, as well as having a whole slew of sensors connected to it for monitoring all the different pressures, temperatures, suspension travel, all that sort of thing. And then we were also running not one, but two Smarty Cams. So we had a Smarty Cam 3 dual, which is the video that we'll see here. And then we also had older Smarty Cam 2 2.1 HD that was mounted on the roll bar as well, just as a backup. But yeah, that was as far as the AIM stuff goes, pretty much what we were running. We did also experiment a little bit with a live streaming box, but ended up having some technical difficulties with that. But yeah, that's pretty much what it was as far as the AIM stuff goes.
Perfect. And Tom, what the rest of the electronics on the car? You're running an ECU, I know, and any other electronics that we were bringing into the AIM data system that you were using?
Yeah, a couple of things. We have a Bosch Motorsport ABS on the car that is also being pulled in to the AIM, as well as ECU wise, we're working with Mtron, so we're running their KV8 standalone. And then I think the last thing that's pretty interesting from an electronic standpoint is we run four-way motorsport active dampers from JRZ, and that is also a pretty trick piece of electronic wizardry that's in the car. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those were
perfect.
cool for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And even from a distance with me looking at the data, that was some interesting stuff that was in there. I'd like to talk about the race just a little bit, and mainly from you, Tom, and just to get your feelings. I just included 5 or 6 slides here of some pictures that we'll just kind of bring up. Maybe you can give us a little bit of your feeling on what was happening at the time, where we're at. But let's start a day or two ahead of time. There was after we spoke to you, that you went to the track. They had some sort of an open test day, and you were able to do some practice runs, and then you came back in the week ahead of it, where they actually had timed qualifying runs on the hill. Give us a little bit of background on that final preparation after all the sim work that you did done.
Yeah, yeah. So the last time we did the webinar, I think it was at the end of May. So I was getting ready to head out to Colorado. I think the car, had left maybe like a day or so after we did our call. But that first weekend in June, so that was June 1st and 2nd, was one of 2 official test weekends for Pikes Peak this year. And so one of the things that they updated in the rules is for a rookie like myself, you were required to run one of the test weekends, and you were required to do at least one day. Now, for us, since we were already transporting the car there and a good amount of team members, we decided, like, let's run both days, right? And I chose the first weekend for a pretty strategic reason, because the second test weekend, they broke the mountain up into thirds, similar to like how we ran it during race week. So there was a lower section, a middle, and an upper. In the first test weekend, it was dividing the mountain up only into halves. So we ran the upper half on Saturday and the lower half on Sunday. So my thought is we could run the entire mountain in 2 days rather than doing it over 3. Made a lot of sense to do so. Working with you, Roger, one of the things that I was really excited to try was you had helped us build these maps, right? So you had built a specific run map for each of the days, and we were actually using official start and end location information using latitude and longitude coordinates from Pikes Peak, right? So I think we got really close in terms of the accuracy of where each of the segments started and ended. In terms of running the mountain for the first time at speed after driving it on the sim, I was really pleasantly surprised that all of the sim prep paid off, and that I immediately was able to feel pretty comfortable and at home. Like I knew where I was, I knew what was coming up next. And again, in a hill climb, as dangerous as Pikes Peak, that's more than half the battle. The other thing that I think was interesting for me is we definitely felt a little bit more power loss than maybe we had even anticipated, right, with the altitude. But what that translated into for me is I felt like I had a little bit more time between some of the corners and stuff, just to think and to plan for like what was coming up next, just because the car wasn't sort of accelerating as hard as I had been driving it on the sim. So being able to do the test weekend 2 weeks before going back for race week was immensely helpful, because not only were we able to start to dial some things in from a car setup standpoint, as well as how the team also did set up every day and breakdown, but seeing the real mile-an-hour data, where I was grabbing certain gears, what the road surface actually felt like, meant that when I got home for 2 weeks between the test to the race week, I actually fine-tuned the setup on my sim car to get it even closer, and did a ton more practice. So I think there was a lot of value in that, and that was nice.
Yeah, and this image we're looking at here, this is the pre-start area, right? This is the staging area, I suppose, getting ready to go. So
It is.
you've put in months and months, maybe a year, or of effort, right? And here you are sitting there and getting ready to go. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, so the staging is interesting. We were lucky enough to be pitted on Race Row this year. So there's like a main pit area or a paddock area for most of the cars and teams. I think it's branded, with Optima batteries. And then along the actual main Pikes Peak Highway, there's a limited amount of pit spots. Usually those are reserved for some of the bigger teams. So like Ford was set up, I think, across from us, actually. Given that we were partnered with Toyo this year, and I was actually debuting the Toyo Proxys R tire up the mountain, we were staged like 200 feet from where this picture was taken, which is really convenient from a being able to keep the tires warm standpoint. And they actually had, so this is the like actual start box. There was a pre-start box that's like maybe 50 feet behind this one. So you'll see the fence or whatever that's there. They actually opened those up when we rolled up, and when it was time to go into the main box, they would then close it back up. So by then, right here, like tire blankets were off and it's go time. And I think in my head, what I was thinking about was, oh shit, there are way more people here today than there were all week long, right? Because when we practiced and qualified and test, the mountain was empty of spectators for the most part, right? It was just, officials and safety workers and other racers. So in my head, I'm like, wow, there are a lot of people here, right? And briefly, I was like, there's a lot of responsibility on my part to get things right, because if I get it wrong, I could seriously injure someone else, right? But I kind of pushed that thought out of my mind and just said, look, you've driven this hundreds of times at this point, on the sim, like, what you're doing, just stick to the run plan. And that's what I did.
Absolutely. And then you're off, huh? Here we go.
Yeah.
And we're gonna play the video in the data file here in a little bit. We're gonna look at the first minute or so, and including this little part here. And so you start in a box, and people haven't probably done a lot of either hill climbs or even autocross the way that it does. But you do the standing start, you roll along, and then the clock starts at a certain spot, right?
Yep. Yeah. And so it's the same here. So the start line actually takes place like, you know, a couple hundred feet after a left-hand turn. So you kind of see me going into that in this photo. And you know, I think some people choose to have pretty exciting launches off the line, right? Like full launch control, you know, lighting up all four tires. On our part, I was just thinking I don't want to break an axle or a diff, so we're just gonna ease off and then, you know, build up speed. And you know, I've also seen some cars get a little hairy here just because of, you know, tires aren't up to temp or whatever. So, you know, my goal was just to make it past the start line cleanly.
Yeah, and Bryc, you mentioned to me a couple of times that just the layout, being in the mountains and all of that, and look at the view here, and what were your thoughts? Where were you at, Bryc? Were you here at the start line, or were you somewhere else up partway up the mountain?
When he started, I was like just behind where that fence area
Okay,
was. I think I
okay.
was actually probably just out of the shot
Ah,
when that picture was taken. Probably just a little bit to the right of it. But there's actually the place where we're looking right now was like a path along the trees with like a spectator area. So I did at one point walk down there, but it's definitely, you gotta be a hardcore fan to spectate that race. It's not, there's none of this fancy grandstand stuff. No, other than the one actually in the paddock area, no, you know, jumbotrons that everyone can see and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely hardcore for a racer standpoint and from a spectator and a tech support standpoint.
yeah, but you did say that it was an amazing place to visit and be able to be at a race at the same time. So that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, that was a bucket list race for me to go to as well.
Yeah, so you're a rally fan, so there's a tie there as well, obviously, right? So
Right, yeah.
perfect. Okay, Tom, here you're off and running, heading up the hill. I just asked you for a few pictures that would kind of show some of it. This is classic to me. This and the next picture, I'll just flash it up really quickly. You know, these are a couple of shots that are just pretty typical, right? So what
Yeah.
as you're running along, we're going to look at some of the data here in a little bit, but everything goes well. The tires, you know, didn't cool down a ton on you. Everything kind of take off well for you.
Yeah, so I love seeing these photos as well. It gives you a sense of one, I think just like how beautiful it is,
Yeah.
and two, like I don't think about it when I'm driving, but looking at these photos, I'm like, man, that road is pretty narrow, and you know, there's definitely that thought now. You know, once we got off the line on race day, you know, a couple things. And actually, I want to double back really quickly. I know Bryc was saying how the fans are hardcore and you have to be so dedicated and so passionate about Pikes Peak. I was blown away by that, especially on race day, because we were required to be at the mountain before 5 a.m. To get in and get settled and make sure that we were there for driver meeting and things like that. It was advised to me by many veterans that we should go to the mountain as early as 1:30, right
Wow.
when gates open for competitors,
Wow.
because the fans start lining up. And by the time we got there at 1:30, there were lines already going down both directions of the highway. They were just being held back because they were letting all the competitors
Wow.
through. Like I've never seen you know, such hardcore fans before. So that was really cool. And yeah, it's grueling for the racers, but I think it's just awesome to see how many people like are excited about the race and wanting to be there. So anyways, just wanted to touch on that really quickly. Looking at these photos, yeah, so when I set off on the line after the line, a few thoughts. On race day, we were able to get the tires warmer than they had been all week long. So a little idea of what each of the practice and qualifying days look like. So Pikes Peak is a public road 364 days out of the year. They only shut it down on race day each year. And so what that means is when we were at the mountain running Tuesday through Friday before the race, we had to get there by 3:30, be set up and ready to go by 5. We would go green shortly after 5 as soon as there was enough light. And then at 8:30, we were shut down and we needed to be packed up and off the mountain at 9. So like for all of the drivers and for the crew to kind of do that 4 days in a row, it's a tremendous lift, right? But that being said, being rushed every morning meant that we only had so much time to get the tires, you know, warm and up to a reasonable operating temp. So I had gotten used to driving the car with how the tires felt after, you know, being on blankets for like an hour and a half. On race day, because we got up to the mountain before 2, we got the tires into the blankets and fired up for many hours before I actually took the green flag at about 7:45. And so the tires were so grippy, in fact, that I ran into a bit of an issue. There was so much grip that kind of two things were happening. One is I think was having maybe some overheating of the hydraulic fluid and the power steering, and that it was struggling to actually get the car turned because there was so much more grip. And also, I think because of the added grip, the car was rolling over a little bit in the front, and I was actually feeling the wheel and tire kind of binding a little bit on the frame. So that's my excuse as to why I was struggling to make some of the hairpins in the same way that I had been earlier in the week. And if you watch the full run, you'll actually see that I dip a wheel maybe 4 or 5 turns in, which was pretty sketchy. But luckily, you know, I think the day before I was hanging out with Clint Vaschaltz, who's a legend of the mountain, and Clint was giving me some just advice, and we were shooting the shit. And you know, I think he was in my mind when that happened, because he had told me the day before, you know, the mountain is never going to be the same on race day as it was throughout the week, and you know, you're going to make mistakes. The worst thing that you can do is to try and make up for that mistake. Like, don't worry about it, forget about it, move on, stick to your run plan. And that's what I did. And it worked out well. So.
Yeah, he's one of the one of the families that has been around that mountain for their entire lives, right? Between them and the Unsers, obviously, and even the Mears gang, even earlier than that, you had some folks that really did help you out, and that's always cool to hear on an event this big and as important it is to them and everybody else that's around there. To have somebody take you under their wing is pretty interesting, pretty cool.
For sure.
Okay, and here you are at the top, right? You're there. I don't know if that is a smile of happy with the speed or happy that you made it. It's one of the two, right?
I think it was both. It was both. Yeah, I was really excited to have just finished, right? I think for a lot of people, you know, Pikes Peak is one of those things where just to get to the top, to cross the finish line and take the checkered flag is a huge accomplishment. And then looking down at the time that I ended up running, it was kind of right where we thought we would be. Again, you don't get to run the entire mountain at all until race day, right? So you're piecing together sector times, and then you're doing some estimates, right? In terms of there are some connecting parts of the road that you just never get to drive on at speed. So again, using all of the data that was at our disposal, I think we were right in the ballpark, and that felt really good, despite the fact that I was dealing with some handling issues and also some temperature issues that I just had to keep an eye on.
For those of you that are here live, we do have a question and answer box, and please add some questions in there if you have a moment. We do have our first question here. I think this is a perfect place to bring it up. Andy Whittle, a longtime webinar attendee here, has asked a question: do you feel like you could drive at 10 tenths, or was it one of those deals, or do you hold back some when you're on the mountain like you were?
Oh yeah, it's a really good question. I think for me, probably a lot of drivers feel the same. It's easy for me to sort of get fired up and want to immediately be driving like right at 10 tenths, right at the limit, and occasionally stepping over that line as well. With Pikes Peak, just given the dangers and the consequences, I actually forced myself, even at home on the sim, to not drive 10 tenths. Right. It's very easy to do that on the sim because you can just, you know, hit reset or whatever if stuff happens. But I actually forced myself for a year of driving on the sim to say, hey, there's real consequences. Like if I mess up, you know, I don't come back from this. Right. And so one of the things that I did in my practices on the simulator is if I had a clean run, my goal each day was to do 3 clean runs. And if I did 3 clean runs, I was done for the day. I'd finished my homework and I could go do other things. But if I made a mistake, if I dropped a wheel, if I spun, if I did something that wasn't right, I would then add an additional run to that. So some days I was doing 7, 8, 9 runs and getting real frustrated, but it was my way to kind of condition myself mentally to always stay at 8 tenths at home on the sim, so that I would essentially do the same when I got to the mountain. And I think at the test weekend, I definitely stayed at 8/10. And then during race week, I gradually built up additional confidence. And I think I felt like on qualifying day on Wednesday, when we ran the lower section of the mountain, I took it up to 9/10. And then I said for race day, I would go to 9 1/4, but cap it off at that, just leaving some margin, right? The racing surface is technically white line to white line. I've seen people skirt that a little bit, and I might have as well here and there, just because there's a fast way through it, and if it's there, I'm going to use it.
Of course, right? Of course. The let's talk a little bit about the. We talked a lot about the mountain before, but the there is an elevation that you're running against, right? You're starting at 93, almost 9,400 feet, and
Yeah.
which is higher than most of us ever really get, right? And you're finishing above 14,000 feet with that elevation gain. Your time that you ran was a 10:31.37. And you mentioned just a minute ago that was pretty close to what you guys had kind of calculated you were going to get. The one question I'm going to start with Bryc, because he was there too, and Bryc and I had chatted about it a little bit. Did the altitude affect you personally as you climbed? But Bryc, as you were up there for the week or so that you spent some time up there, did that altitude bother you at all? I know you're a mountain climber a little bit as well, right?
So I've been to Colorado before, and I've actually been up to Pikes Peak years ago. Not during the race, but when it was just open to the public, and it's definitely noticeable, but it's never been something like I haven't gotten altitude sickness, or it's never been something that's like super adversely affect me. But I mean, it's noticeable, especially if you start even a light jog or lifting some heavy stuff, you'll notice that you are out of breath a lot quicker up there. But
Running up the paddock to somebody else's pit area was you had to keep that a little bit to
yeah,
the minimum, huh?
yeah, and I think it affects everyone differently too. So,
Yeah.
and we were also there for the whole week, so we had time to get acclimated to it. But yeah, it's definitely different. You will notice it.
Tom, I know when we had our talk last time, you had mentioned that there was some as part of the organization they had help with oxygen and some other stuff that was
Mhm.
available to you. What in the end you ran the event? Did you use oxygen, or did you make it and you were happy with what you did?
Yeah, so when we did the first test weekend, June 1st and 2nd, we picked up some oxygen bottles. So the Pikes Peak organization provides an oxygen subscription through the official medical doctor that's on staff there. So it was available, and I said to myself, hey, given that I live at sea level in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's probably a good idea to have it in case we need it. And I'm guessing from a performance standpoint, it'll make some positive difference. On Saturday, I actually ran the entire test day without using oxygen, just to kind of see how I would feel, right? And so that day we were starting in the upper half of the mountain, meaning that we were at Glen Cove and we went all the way to the summit. I think driving in the morning, I started to feel the altitude a little bit already, right? Just because, again, to your point, you're climbing up to nearly 9,400 at the start line, but at Glen Cove, you're actually closer to about 10,000 feet already, and that's where the steep climbing actually starts. So I know for some of the guys on the team, they felt the altitude, I think, a little bit more than I did. Although, to be fair, I had the luxury as the driver of being able to kind of stand around or sit in my flip-flops and wait to get into the car while they're, setting up and moving heavy wheels around and things like that. So I think for all of us, it was just a good reminder to like slow down, remember to breathe, catch our breath, and then hydrating was really important. We across the team, we all kind of told each other to drink a lot of water, and I definitely, in looking back, I consume probably 3 or 4 times more water per day than I normally drink at
Wow.
home. And I felt thirsty almost all the time. Right. So that was, I guess, how it affected me. Like in terms of breathing and stuff, I was fine, but I just constantly felt thirsty.
Your
Um,
concentration obviously was okay.
yeah, concentration I think was
Okay.
okay. On Sunday, I decided to try the oxygen just to see if it had any effect on me. And I don't know that I could actually feel a difference, but I said like, hey, I'm used to using it now. We may as well use it for the rest of the time. So I ended up running oxygen all during race week. So Tuesday through Friday, and then obviously on race day. There's a funny story here actually, in that on qualifying day, which was Wednesday when we ran the lower section. So the qualifying sector is the same for all of the cars, right? So there's 6 classes. There were 70 cars signed up this year. And qualifying for each of the classes was the day that you ran start line to Glen Cove. Well, on qualifying day, because of, you know, some inclement weather and stuff, we were like rushing to go again, right? While conditions were still somewhat reasonable. It was starting to rain, it was getting damp and misty, but the surface was still like pretty good. So I wanted to at least bank a good time. That meant though that there wasn't actually enough time to swap O2 tanks. And my crew chief sent me out telling me that I was all good. In reality, he looked at my oxygen tank and it was already empty. He just didn't want to say anything to me to distract me and didn't tell me until I got back. So I ran my qual time without oxygen, just for the record.
That's funny what they will tell drivers to not bother them.
That's how it goes, right? It's like when you
It's
get the fast pressures or something like that, right?
Always. The last thing I'd like to talk about before we jump into some live data, again, if you guys have any questions, make sure you put them into the question and answer box. We will get to those. You did a lot of your testing on or all of your learning and on either sim or watching videos, and that's what we talked a lot about last time. And this is just a screen capture of the of one of your full runs up the mountain before. And what was interesting is after you got back and during the time there, you know, Bryc was grabbing data files and sending them to me, and video files, and including the race data that I've got a screen capture of here, and we'll actually open it up and take a look at it and scroll through some of it and play a little bit of it so everybody can see some of it. But the correlation between the two sounds like it fit pretty well. I know just in an email that you sent me this afternoon, you've already working on next year and trying a few new things that we'll take a look at in the next couple of days, or maybe this evening. But from the data side, one of the cool things is we do have not only the video and the normal things of data that we're used to using on a track style of things, but we've got, you know, which is speed and lateral G's and throttle and brake pressures and such. But we've also got the GPS slope of the roadway. We've got altitude that we'll take a look at here as we kind of look through this. But I thought we would jump in and take a look at some live data here. You mentioned 3 different things when we were chatting ahead of this that we might be able to play. I apologize ahead of time. I have not been able to figure out a good way of playing the audio, which is masterful, by the way, as part of the video. The sound of this car is an amazing thing, and I apologize for that. But
we will watch it on Tom's YouTube.
Yeah, there you go. And we'll talk more about that as we're getting ready to close. Tom will share some of his YouTube and social media stuff. We'll throw it might already be in there, but we can find his YouTube link and place it into the chat box. By the way, those of you that are watching this later, all of the questions, all of the links that we've talked about already and we'll talk about going forward will be those links will be in the YouTube description. So if you want to go watch some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, go take a look at it. So let's bring up the live data. And this is Race Studio 3. A little bit of a there's the link of it. Don't watch it now though, everybody, but watch it in a little bit later for those of you that are live. The interesting thing here is our next webinar, which we'll talk about here right at the end, as we always do, is going to be here in a couple of weeks. We'll be talking about some new Race Studio 3 enhancements. You're going to see one of those here in just a moment. I'm going to work this and show this in Race Studio 3 beta, but and it's a pre-production beta, so you won't, even if you have beta, you won't see it. But there's a couple things that you're going to see here. You're going to see some little triangles in the data file, and like right there, right? And those are, we can now add comments to the to Race Studio 3 analysis. If you find something you want to mark, we now have that ability to mark those and then be able to quickly see them in the storyline as well, and be able to go in and find those data points easier. Tom had mentioned a couple of things that had happened in the during the run So I marked them to make it a little bit easier for me to find here. So we're going to jump back to the beginning. This is the video, the Smarty Cam duel that was playing. You can see Tom down here from the side. You'll be able to see his hands. I'll make this a little bit bigger as we get ready to go. But we'll start this one off right at the pre-start line. There's the flagman giving the green flag. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this over just a little bit, make it even bigger for you to see while you're playing this. And then again, I apologize for the audio, but but here we go. Let's take a look at it. Very loud in my ears, by the way, but not so here he is off and running. Tom, if you see something about 40 seconds in, we're about just a couple seconds in right now. There was your first little incident that you talked about that you had trouble with. Anything else you see that you remember right here off the bat?
I think just right here, I was just kind of feeling out the grip, right? Again, on practice and qual days, I can do a sight lap, kind of feel things out, and then gradually build up pace. But on race day, it's just you get the one run, right? So it's a little bit of balancing, like, trying to go fast with also being a little bit cautious because I didn't know what to expect, really. Ooh, and we're coming up on the whoopsie here. Ooh, right there.
I'm with the noise of the car in the background. I haven't been able to hear your talk there, so I apologize for that. But if we go back and we just kind of take a look at that, I'll just scrub through it a little bit. Another cool little tip for those of you that are watching data, have video in your data. If you're zoomed way out on the data portion, the ability to scrub back and forth happens very quickly in the video, right? So if you find that to be happening to you, zoom in on the data side, and now you can get almost a frame by frame feel of what happened there. So Tom, I don't know if you had mentioned that as you were talking just now, but you talked about you actually did this in the sim a few times as well.
I have. I've dropped the tire in many places on the mountain on the sim, which I guess is a good way to do it. Which meant that right here, when you see me doing it, the front right is fully off in the dirt. This was just a part where, again, I turned in and gave, I would say the same amount of steering input that I've been used to giving all week long, and the car did not turn in the same way that I'd been used to. So I ran wide, dropped the right front into the dirt, and that's a pretty hairy moment. Again, Pikes Peak is one of those places where you can have great car control, but the problem is there's not enough space to even, slide or correct or do whatever. Fortunately, in some ways, this was a spot where, because I had done this before on the sim, I knew, like, just straighten it out, keep my foot in it, and keep going. And that's what I did here. So I've had friends watch this video who didn't even see this because it happened so quickly, right? They missed it. But yeah,
you had mentioned
front right in the dirt.
Yeah, you had mentioned to me that it was in there, and I played by real quickly earlier today, and I was just trying to find it. We were going to talk about it, and I went right past it as well. I had it small on my screen. It was I had and I didn't see it. The interesting part of the data here is from the data's perspective, right? From what I do, is you're at maximum lateral G's back here in the middle of the corner, right? And now you're starting the exit of the corner, and from what I can see here, here's your throttle position. At the apex, you went to throttle up like you normally would, and then you jumped back out of the throttle. I think your mind, right at this point right here, knew it was already happening, right?
Yeah.
You come along here, you're opening up your hands, and it's and you started to throttle up, and then you had to back off and catch the car, right? Mm-hmm. and then get back after it. It's interesting. That drivers, even if you don't even remember it now, but here at the peak of the G's, you had started to throttle up like you normally would, and then right away you knew right off the bat, oh, I'm a little faster than I need to be here. Mm-hmm. We better catch this one early. So perfect. The next one was a little bit farther up the mountain, obviously. Mm-hmm. That was kind of intriguing to me. And what caught this one for me, I remember I sent you a note, and it was a little bit cryptic, I guess. And I said, hey, what do we want to show, right? And And do you want to show when you've made a little bit of an error, or should we show some cool stuff? And maybe, and you came back, to your credit, no, I'm not, let's show anything that was. And you even mentioned there's a hairpin up here that, boy, I had a problem with a light or a warning, and totally missed the corner. It was funny, but that's the one that I had picked out, right? And
Yeah.
my eye, what took it was, this was by far the largest brake pressure that was applied in your entire run, and that's what caught my eye, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to back it up here just a little bit, and let's look at the view out of the sky. There's you can tell you're up in the mountains, right? Here we are at late June, early July, and there's still snow on the ground. So I'm going to play this again. The let's see, it's at about 7:25 or so. So let's go back about 15, and we'll play it again. I have to turn down the volume. If you want to chat about what you're seeing a little bit, I won't be able to hear you, but you go ahead and talk about it a little bit.
Sure, sounds good.
Start that up.
Yeah, so at this part of the run,
loose off the corner,
you're doing a lot of climbing, right, in a shortest amount of distance. And what I started to notice, and here's where I missed the corner. What I started to notice in this part of the mountain, so this is essentially it's technically the middle sector of the mountain. So from Glen Cove to right here where the video is paused is the entrance of Devil's Playground. This is where you're doing pretty much majority of the climbing, right? So you're going from about 10,000 feet to, I think, 13,000 feet. So 3,000 feet of climb in a very short amount of time. I think it's like just under 3 minutes. And what I started to notice during this section is the gearbox temp display on my dash was starting to creep up and up and up. And what ended up happening, why I blew this braking zone, or at least it's my excuse and I'm sticking to it, is we had programmed a lot of really great warning lights on the PDM and for the dash display. Well, when the gearbox temp went above 285, I got a really big high gearbox temp warning. And so I looked down at that, and by the time I looked up, I had missed the braking zone for this last right-hand hairpin, which is why I slammed on the brakes as hard as I did, because I was like, oh shit, I'm not going to make the corner. In fact, I was so distracted. I was just focused on getting the car slowed down. I didn't even downshift from second to first, which is normally what I would do here. It was definitely a gutting mistake, because right after this hairpin is a pretty long run past Devil's Playground into a kink. So that really killed my time there. I lost, many seconds here as a result of that mistake. So I was pretty frustrated at myself after the fact, but it is what it is.
It is rare that we see brake pressure sensors that are run almost through the full travel. Brick probably sees this a lot, but 1953 PSI, that is really close to maxing out the 0-2000 pressure
Yeah,
sensor,
I was
right?
say, usually we're not all the way at the max of that range.
That's how I was like a oh shit moment, right? And I ride a road bike, and so I've got strong quads and calves, and I put the full leg to use there, trying to get the pedal down.
Hopefully he wore the brown race suit.
Yeah, there was although, Tom, I will share a little bit that one of the things I shared with you early in the week was braking, and the track was so rough that you guys had started to work the very first practice runs. You were bouncing around a little bit, and I know the IBOC folks, I'm sorry, the JRZ folks worked with you to get it better. That is a very, very good looking brake trace. You peaked it out and came back down, right? There was a lot of bouncing that I'm assuming was some of the trouble that we saw in some of the braking that were happening from before.
Yeah. And I actually, on that note, I see a question from Andy in the Q&A around, how the JRZ performed in the top section. So I'd love to address that, actually.
Absolutely.
I would say, having driven the mountain, after a few days in real life compared to the sim, I think the sim is maybe 80 to 85% of the way there in terms of accuracy, realism. And I would say the difference really in terms of the remaining like 15 to 20% in terms of what was different was mostly around two things. One, the surface of Pikes Peak this year is significantly bumpier than I think it's ever been. So talking to a lot of veterans, they've all said like, this is the worst year it's ever been. It actually sort of feels like every year it's getting worse and worse. So maybe at some point they need to do a repave, right? So I think when Sebastian Loeb ran, his original record time was right after a repave. So the mountain was really smooth and nice. And then it's kind of gotten worse since then.
Can I just add that that's like the bumpiest in-car video I've ever seen, and I've seen
Yeah, if you watch
it was
my
like a
head,
boat in
I'm
high
like
seas up there. It
rattling
was-
around in there. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But the bumps were gnarly, so much so that when we looked at the data, I was like, man, I'm much slower in the upper section in real life than compared to the sim. And a big part of it was just I couldn't keep my foot down, right? I couldn't keep my foot down on the throttle. I was just skipping over the road surface. It felt like I was riding like a wave runner on the open ocean, you know? And it not only did it make it difficult to put the power down, but I had a hard time braking as well. Because when you're braking and skipping over the road surface, you know, it's kind of hairy. So we focused a lot on actually tuning the active dampers in the upper section of the mountain. So on the first day that we practiced up there, we made a bunch of different changes. And we actually found, this is incredible, it almost doesn't sound real. So the upper section of the mountain, you're doing it in about 3 minutes as well. Well, I started the day running it, you know, in like the 330s, and then through all the setup changes that we made, by my 5th run, I think I did like a 311. So we found more than 18 seconds just through setup, right? Which is incredible. But it just, if you watch the earlier videos and you watch then after we kind of found the sweet spot, it's night and day, right? That throttle is fully green and 100%, right? Which, you know, makes a big difference. And again, I was able to also, through just learning the road, figure out where I wanted to be braking, right, with the bumps, because the ideal braking zone for some of the corners would be literally on top of a huge bump. So I experimented, right? I tried braking on the bump, I tried braking after the bump, and I tried braking before the bump to figure out, you know, what felt better. And I think that also helped. Right?
And he brings up a message that I have ran into as a data guy. Whenever you're braking on uphill areas, the braking is so much better because the car is being pressed into the track. Was that a learned skill while you were there as well? Something you had to fine tune?
Yeah, a little bit. I would say what helped with that in some ways is, so I'm based in California, and one of the tracks that's somewhat local to me that I've had a lot of seat time at is Buttonwillow. And Buttonwillow, when you run it backwards, going backwards into Cotton Corners, you can brake much later because it's like, you know, uphill, right? You go down and then up this hill and the car gets loaded. So having raced that a bunch of years, I actually was like, hey, I know in my head that if I'm braking on an incline, I don't need to, you know, I can brake a lot later and brake a lot harder, right? And so that was sort of in the back of my mind, I guess, in some small way.
Another track there local to you is Sonoma into turn 2, right? The
Yep.
right-hander at the top
Exactly.
of the hill. That was where I first noticed it, working with I think some Formula Continental guys I was down there with, and it was amazing how much deeper they could go in their eye. The driver's eye is not used to being, you know, that the car is pointed up quite so steeply, because it's to you it's just relative to the ground, right, as a driver, and we just had to keep on working with them until they could adjust that braking. So interesting.
We got to work on that together, Roger. I feel like turn 2 is not a strength of mine at the moment. So.
Well, it probably will be next time after this entire experience, right? The Dan Doman mentions that why not use dash alarms instead of trying to read the dash. My guess is that is exactly what you had happen. An alarm or a lights did come on and start flashing. Exactly.
Yeah. So I like to do both. I think having the 10-inch display is really nice because you can have a lot of information in front of you, and I'm pretty comfortable kind of glancing at different things while I'm driving. So one of the things that we programmed into the PDM is once the temperature goes above a certain degree, I think for us it's like 250, the color will start to change just on the dash in terms of how it's displayed. And then once it goes above another threshold, there's like a full alarm that comes on, and that's the one that like kind of distracted me basically.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's part of your kind of your job is to watch some of those. You obviously got to finish on top of it, right? So we wouldn't put those in there unless it's important, obviously. So Perfect. Let's watch a little bit of the finish, just because it's the last little run. We're getting a little short on time here at the end, but I thought we would run this last few seconds of the run and get your thoughts on this as it was heading up to the finish line.
Cool.
Look at that view, huh? Nothing, blue sky.
Yeah, I think for folks watching this, like the biggest thing that I notice is just look at my head. Like I'm bobbing around in there.
Tight corner.
It's so bumpy.
Ah.
Especially right here, the final left across the finish line. There's these huge dips.
And there was the finish line, huh?
Yep.
But at that point, you're probably taking a deeper breath than normal with the lack of air, I suppose. Getting ready to chat about it. You guys have radios in the cars at all, or did it? Were you by yourself there for a while till you got up to your crew?
Yeah, so we do run radio in the car. You know, given that it's a hill climb and not a wheel-to-wheel race, I actually intentionally we planned with the team to be off comms like during the run, right? And just as a precaution, so throughout practice and qual days, I would keep the radio on, but basically after setting off, I wouldn't radio until I finished my run. We had some reception issues, right? Just the mountain is challenging, right? It's a lot of elevation change and a lot of corners. So what we realized was the guys could hear me. So at least I could radio back like, hey, I made it, I'm good. But then I wasn't able to hear them. So what I ended up doing each time was just, I had my jacket behind my seat with my phone in it. And so we would kind of text while I sat and waited to come back down. On race day, given the fact that, you know, it was like full go time, very serious, I wanted to avoid any risk that I would accidentally get distracted, right? We had multiple guys on radio, and so someone accidentally hits the button and opens the channel, that could really distract me and be dangerous. So when I set off on race day, when they threw the green flag, I actually reached up and pushed the radio. I turned the power to the radio off. And when I finish the run right here, I think the video cuts off, but if you see the full file, you actually see me power the radio back on to tell the guys that like I made it and I was good.
I was going to point out that was a cool part of the video, just rewatching the in-car that we're seeing right now, where we could just hear you. I made it to the top, boys. If you can hear me, I made it to the top.
Yeah.
There's a lot of excitement and relief in your voice.
Yeah.
And in the entire crew, I'm sure, as well.
Right? Yeah.
While it's not maybe as dangerous as some things, there is some danger there, obviously, and everybody was wishing you well, and there you did it. Good for you. The other thing that I mentioned to you when I got the data file and I looked down here was the time that the AIM calculated. You know, as you mentioned, we did get the coordinates from the start line to the finish line, plus all the break points, and we made the track maps that if you were to be watching this as we were scrolling along, it's the SmartyCam dot is following the track line, which is a little easier to do, and everything is all built for you in closed circuit racing, right? But this was a little bit of a different thing, so we had to build these things kind of special. And now if anybody else is going to do this, we have all these maps built. We'll have the full map, obviously, is in our Race Studio 3 track map settings, but if somebody wants practice day, the lower third, middle third, upper third, those kind of things, we have those available. We may put them in into the database, I suppose, but
tip of the hat to you, Roger, for setting all those up, because they worked flawlessly, like so perfect throughout the whole weekend, and the actual race time was to the 1,000th of the actual live timing. So between you setting that up and also whoever at Pikes Peak International Hill Climb who got the coordinates, they were exactly right.
Exactly. That it was the doing something like that is a little bit of work, especially on these point-to-point races, because we don't necessarily have the data. So we actually took it from the sim and we brought it in, and the whole package came together, and it was an amazing process of bringing it all together. So I appreciate all the time and effort that everybody put into this. It was fun to watch from a distance, and I know great fun to be there while you were there. So let's talk a little bit to kind of close this down. We'll as I'm getting ready to, our Mitch talks about Tom, a question there. Let's get to that as we kind of close it up with you here in just a moment, because
Sure.
that's it. That is the closing question that
Yeah.
no doubt we all would want to know. So let me kind of close it up here a little bit, and we will get back to that. So this video from this webinar, plus all the rest of our webinars, will be on YouTube very shortly this evening. We have a whole bunch of them there, and we're be adding a bunch more shortly, shorter versions of things that I've Bryc and myself have been working on that will be showing up here soon. So keep checking onto the YouTube site for that. Customer support, boy, we've got people all over the place, right, Bryc? We're from the lowlands to the highlands in this particular case. So
when I was at Pikes Peak, we were at 6 other races across the country at that time too.
yeah, we're not a huge company, and yet we've got our technicians are everywhere, and kudos to them. A lot of hard work, and just a ton of service for the folks that are using our equipment, and proud of all of them. Proud of you guys that do all of that. So keep your eye out for us at the tracks, or if not, give us a call at the 800 number, and we're more than happy to help. So the next webinar, I mentioned it briefly, but on July 30th. We're gonna have another webinar. It's one of our earlier in the day webinars, and we will be talking. We'll have Emiliano here as our guest, and there is a lot of changes that are coming, small little additions and updates to Race Studio 3 in the analysis side and in the configuration side. And we're going to go over what those changes are. You may have seen some of them in the latest version, but there are even more, including some of the stuff that I showed you here today. So tune in. We're going to talk all about Race Studio 3 analysis on that day. So Tom, the next year, what are your plans? What is your hopes? What are your dreams?
Yeah. I also just really quickly want to say, Roger, I know you felt like you were watching from home, but I actually think for me and for the team, you were very much there with us, right? Given all the things that you did to help ahead of time and during, right? We were sending you data files, we were chatting pretty much the entire time. So
yeah,
huge
great fun.
kudos to you,
Great fun.
and thank you again.
Nope, very
In terms of next year, yeah, so I got interviewed on the live stream right after getting out of the car, and it wasn't planned because, you know, I had a lot of friends and family who were asking me like, are you going to do it again, or is this a one and done? And I got out of the car, and I think my answer to the question then is my same answer now, which is already thinking about next year. You know, Mitch, definitely plan to beat the time. I think looking at the data, my sector times on race day, if you just use what I had done through practice and qual earlier in the week, it would have been about 20 seconds faster total time. And then I think with a little bit of setup refinement and some additional power, I think we can get into that really exclusive sub 10-minute club. So that's the goal for 2025. In terms of improvements, you know, not going to do huge drastic changes. I'm big on iterative and building on a good foundation, which I think we have. So I think we're going to focus on some suspension setup improvements, and then we're looking to add just a little bit of power, maybe, you know, 75 to 100 more, but not a crazy amount. So
a typical racer, right? At the end of the day, yeah, we're going to work harder, but we want more power. We want more power, right? Exactly. Well, thanks, Tom, for coming in here and joining us twice within a short period of time. It's been great. And Bryc, I'm so pleased that you were able to go and experience that. One of your notes said something to me that it was even better to see everything from different standpoints, from all the preparation that happened, you know, with some other folks. Robbie, I know, worked a lot on the program. Obviously, Mike Janes helped support it, and to put it all together, and you were able to see it from start to finish. It was, I think that was pretty cool task for you as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just from Tom's team to all the other supporters and us and backers that he has, to the Pikes Peak people who have to deal with all the logistics of putting that on and stuff. It is staggering the amount of things, planning and logistics and stuff that goes into an operation like that. So it was really cool to see it all come together for everyone.
Pretty cool. I look forward to working with you again next year, Tom, and anything you can do, need us to do, and work with you as you are in the preparation mode, just let us know. Anything I can do, it'll be great. So Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks to both of you for joining me here at this late at night, especially for Bryc. Bryc's out on the East Coast, so it's almost bedtime for Bryc. But appreciate everybody coming, and I hope you guys enjoyed this, and look forward to seeing you all next time when we come back and we talk a little bit about Race Studio 3 analysis. So thanks guys, and we will see you guys all next time. Talk to you soon.
See you guys later. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.